Hello and welcome to another episode of Seddon Laceys Comic Stash and a top five again. I knew we took so long to do them. We've brought them around like buses and there's two in quick
Buses.
succession. So this time it is top five non-hero characters.
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about it today, one of the things that kind of went through my head is I almost framed it as supporting cast. You know, the people who would get the Oscar that no one remembers the year later, like the people who aren't your main person. And as we said, one of the rules we kind of laid down is to avoid things like psychics, so Robins and people like that are people who are not necessarily a hero or a villain or anyone with powers or anything like that. In fact, one of mine I had to bounce because it was one I did want, but I figured it was a little bit cheaty because they technically had powers. But giving some love to all those people who I don't know are big in the lives of the heroes that we read month in month out, and probably have a bigger impact than maybe you'd really imagine.
Yes. But before we go into our top fives, as is tradition, it is off to the reading corners.
So my reading corner almost seems like it might have been designed for this show, but it wasn't. It's just pure fluke. Because technically, even though they star in this comic, I guess you could argue that most of them are supporting cast. So I've been going back and reading Gotham Central, and Gotham Central, available on the wonderful DC Universe Infinite app, sponsor us DC Universe Infinite, is a series about the Gotham Police Department. And when I say it's a series about the Gotham Police Department, it really is. It's focusing. It's more like a TV police procedural. And the edition I read had the first 10 issues in it. So issues 1 to 10 were smacked out, and they start off with Ed Brubaker, who does an amazing run on Captain America, and Greg Rucka, who I love his comics, but also I love his novels as well. But initially, they co-write the first story, and then they alternate. Or certainly in this volume, they alternate. So
Yeah.
Ed Brubaker will take the writing, then Greg Rucka does, and the art all the way along is by Michael Lark. This is a lovely dip into the world of Batman. So the first story has Mr. Freeze in it, but Mr. Freeze kills a policeman. They're on an investigation, and Mr. Freeze kills a policeman, and it's very much a race against time for the police to try and track down Mr. Freeze and bring him to justice before nighttime, because they don't want Batman to do it. They want to take down this person who took down their own. And then in subsequent issues, it actually then follows up on the crime that they were investigating in this first one. And then so we get less of the kind of supervillains, and it's more back into actual police drama. But Batman's always mentioned. Harvey Bullock's mentioned a lot. Jim Gordon gets mentioned a lot because at the time that we are when this was released, I think Harvey Bullock's just been fired by internal investigations. I think Jim Gordon has stepped down as commissioner. But you're always getting this smattering of the Bat universe.
Yeah.
But you are watching, I don't want to say The Wire, but that kind of world of policing rather than Cops for those UK viewers, or The Bill for those UK viewers out there. It's got like a lot more serious edge. And then the final story of it, I think, is where it really starts to shine. And that's where we get introduced to, and there's a number of characters that will go all the way through this series, but in particular, Renee Montoya. And the storyline is about her being outed as a lesbian, and it is of its time. So it really does dip into what it was like for someone from the law enforcement world in that time to be outed into a police station. And it also touches on her and her family and how her family treat her. But she's outed because a criminal is trying to get revenge on her because she duffed him up a bit. And, there's some stuff around, should she have duffed him up? There's a lawsuit in place. It's great. It's absolutely fantastic. I have read it before, but it has been, like 15 years since I've read it. And going back to it has been an absolute treasure. And it's one of those ones where I remember it being great. I actually think it's even better than I remember going back to it now. It's set in the time frame it's set. So be ready for maybe not the modern interpretations of some of these things that you expect, but great
Yeah.
historical context and written fantastically.
Yeah, I did see that you had been reading it, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." At some point, I might start that one.
Right up your alley. Right up your alley, I reckon.
Yeah, it stinks of CSI.
And I would say, like, I avoided CSI because I find, like, my experience of watching, I did quite like the CSI TV show, but it's a lot more glamorous than I think this is. You know, like CSI often had, like, it was in Vegas quite often, wasn't it? So it was all shiny, whereas this is dingy Gotham. You know, like, even though some of it's happening during the daytime, the way that Michael Lark draws it, all the buildings look like they're caked in mud, and the office they're in looks bad. Every coffee cup looks like it's been dirty and hasn't been washed for months, that sort of thing. And you get that feeling of what it's probably like being in a major crime area in a police department.
Nice. Definitely one for the list.
Add it on.
So what I've been reading, I'm not going to go into because there's going to be an episode about it soon. But I have been reading Sandman, and fuck me, it is awesome. And tune in soon for
Very
a
soon.
full breakdown of how awesome and how much, or what I'm thinking about it. I shouldn't give spoilers away of how good it is.
And I guess a little bit of why we're on Sandman now, and why we've not been on Sandman before. And I know we've touched on that in a earlier episodes, but yes, Sandman coming soon.
Yes, which we will cover in much more detail. But before we do anything around that sort of thing, because that's for another time, we're here for top fives.
We are here for top fives.
Said, as is tradition with you in lists, I expect you to have an array of honourable mentions.
No, I don't. The only thing I would say that's close to an honourable mention is the one that didn't make the list that I thought was a little bit cheaty, and that was Cassidy from Preacher. And I thought it was a little bit cheaty because he is a vampire and he's pretty and he's got powers, and I think it's arguable that he's a main character. But I kind of really toyed with putting him in because I love the character of Cassidy. I think, and I love Preacher. You've got other people in it like Arseface but you just go, do you know what? It's an ensemble piece, and I'm not entirely sure whether any of them really fit the category, but I was very tempted by Cassidy. But no, other than that, there's someone who I could have put as an honourable mention, but when I get to the point where he could have made it into the list, and it is a he, I'll cover kind of why they didn't and why they didn't make honourable mention either.
Fair enough. So I will start, and I will go with my number 5, which will be one that will please you.
Oh.
My number 5 is from Hawkeye.
Oh.
And is Lucky the pizza dog.
Do you know what? I now want to rewrite my list. I didn't think of Lucky the pizza dog. What a fucking idiot.
So
go for it.
I've read the first 2 trades of Hawkeye now. And though Lucky doesn't do a great deal, he's just there and in the right place at the right time. It's perfect sort of comic relief at times, of where he just will be in a scene and Clint will just have that look on his face of, oh, the dog again. And yeah, it's just one of those of, for someone that doesn't really do pets, I'm not an animal person, Lucky does sort of just it just breaks up the tyranny and the monotony that is Clint's life most of the time, where he's miserable and just doesn't want to be around people, yet he embraces this rescue dog.
As a spoiler for my list, no animals appear on my list, but I was actually thinking, not long before we went on, of going, oh shit, I didn't think of animals. And I kind of started to think about it. When I know you got your 5 and animals pair, but I think where you are absolutely spot on with this, and not being a pet lover, I love dogs. I absolutely love dogs. And Lucky the pizza dog is a dog. And I know it's a really strange thing to say, but it's a perfect portrayal of a dog. And exactly how you were describing it there. You know, he's there to do the things that dogs do when human beings are down, or when they're up, or when human beings aren't looking. and he feels like it's written by someone who owns a dog and has watched their dog for a long time and has kind of gone, I want to focus like what dogs do in our world. And of course, very early doors in that in the first trade, isn't it, where you get the moment where Lucky kind of comes into their lives, and just that heart-wrenching moment where Lucky is in peril. Let's say, oh, any spoilers, go and watch our Hawkeye show. But seeing that connection that Clint makes with Lucky instantaneously by kind of going, it's not my dog, it's not my dog, it's not my dog, and almost that kind of, it's my dog now. A beautiful pick, fantastic pet portrayal, and you say about that maybe mundanity that series tried to get across, like what a hero does when they're not heroing or between heroing. It humanizes Clint, and I think it really helps that story, because Clint could easily come across as more of an asshole than he's intended to be without him. And I know Kate Bishop is in there to do part of that as well, but yeah, Lucky brings a lot of those elements to I don't know, to accentuate Clint's positives, to make you realise that he's not a total bastard.
Exactly. So what is your number 5?
Well, funny enough, my number 5 isn't a dog. But speaking of something that's there to accentuate someone not being a bastard, my number 5 is, and I don't know whether you've read this, so I don't know whether you'll necessarily know who this is, but a character called Blind Owl. And it is blind because they are blind. So this was from Deadpool's first solo series. And when I say his first solo series, his first ongoing solo series. So not the couple of limited series he had previous to that. But we're going back to 1997. And I'd seen Deadpool appearing like New Mutants, X-Force. And he was quite an interesting character. Wasn't so interested in the limited series. But when I heard there was an ongoing, I was thinking, but he's a villain. How are you going to kind of do this? And this is before we knew he was the wisecracking character that he becomes. But this is my favorite one of Deadpool. Joe Kelly does it, and a large part of the series is Deadpool's kind of journey from merc to a hero, and a hero for a reason, but the rocky road he takes to that, and the fact that he is not necessarily a hero, he just has the ability to do heroic stuff in him. So Blind Owl is a blind character, and I believe she's in the movies. She's the lass who lives with him in the movies.
Yes.
But I don't know whether they call her Blind Owl in the movies. But she is an aged white woman in the comic books. Shares a bit of a resemblance to Aunt May from SpiderMan. And I mention that because I'll come back to Aunt May from SpiderMan when I'm talking about Blind Owl. But bearing in mind you knew nothing about Deadpool at this point, or not much about Deadpool's history, he lives with Blind Owl, and he mocks her a lot. He teases her. He hides things from her. But there are parts where you kind of get this feeling that they have this playful relationship. There's almost an accepting relationship between the two of them. But it isn't. She's effectively his captive. He has kidnapped her. He holds her against her will. He locks her in a cupboard when she doesn't do what she wants to do. And this is why I love her as a supporting character, is in a series where, and I'm going to go into a bit of Deadpool here. Deadpool should be a villain. Deadpool shouldn't be a hero.
Yes.
I understand that he is very funny. He breaks the fourth wall and things like that. But he is a bastard. Now, you can go into the left, right, and centres of what makes him a bastard, but that's why I thought this character was so important, because it was so easy to, in certain panels of this, fall in love with Deadpool and go, oh, he's so funny, he's nice, really. And then you realise that he keeps someone captive in his house. But even in scenes with them together, sometimes you're going, oh, look at them. They're playful, they're fun, they like it. They don't. It is a forced relationship. And you find out stuff about her history. She had been a secret agent. That's how that he'd got to know her. He'd had a contract to kill her. He hadn't, and things like that. But ultimately, I think why she makes my top 5 is one, that the material she's in is great. It's funny. It's interesting, which is obviously what we want when we read a story. But I think it's where a supporting character is used to ground the main character, to constantly tempt us into going, he's all right, he's all right. Oh no, I forgot.
He's a dick.
He's a dick. He kidnaps people, or he's a dick. He does really horrible things to this person who, and they do have like in this kidnappy. I don't know if that's a real term. Relationship. There are times where he very much listens to Blind Owl and very much takes Blind Owl advice. I think he reveres her, but whilst revering her, still holds her captive. But a cracking run. I know I'm always saying about add this to your list, but I know you're a Deadpool fan. I think that the Joe Kelly run from '97 is, and then subsequent to that, Christopher Priest takes over. For me, that is the best Deadpool has ever been, and partly because of Blind Owl being in it.
Okay, I will definitely have a look at that because, as I said, most of my Deadpool is turn of the century stuff, where and a lot of them being either like single hits or a lot more just individual stories that don't they're not like have a full run. They're he'll just turn the fuck up for and then steal Mjolnir because
I still say the roadmap to who he is now starts here, and I think without this, we don't have Deadpool now. We don't have a Deadpool movie. We don't have all of that. I think it all starts with this Joe Kelly run.
Awesome. So my number 4 is Lucius Fox, the man behind the power of Batman. I was thinking in this one, I was like, Alfred. But it was when I actually realised that if we were doing it off TV and film versions of characters, then that Alfred's awesome. He's never really that good in the comics. He doesn't have that same gravitas that he does.
I think we come late to the party for Alfred in the comics. I think by the time we start reading the comics, Alfred's been around forever.
Yeah.
And I think probably the stuff that might have resonated with us or might have reminded us about Alfred from Batman 66. P.S. was watching Batman 66 yesterday. Oh, not the movie. I finally got my box set out of every episode, so I was cramming through some of them yesterday. I think by the time we get to, and don't get me wrong, in very modern times, in the last few years, I know Alfred's kind of been put to the forefront again. Spoilers to anyone who hasn't seen, but like gets killed off, and I think he's just about to come back. But I think our Alfred is more, as you say, scoped and shaped by what we saw on TV and movies, isn't it, rather than what we got in our comic book reading.
So why I went with Lucius is, especially from the sort of when I started reading Batman stuff in the sort of 90s, and especially when I've sort of gone back to like the late 80s stuff as well. Lucius is the one that builds the toys. He comes up with the ideas. He gives Batman these trinkets and new gadgets for him to use. But he also is always there to remind him that he is part of the business and how things have got to look for that side of it, and just sort of trying to keep him in check in a way that in the films and TV, Alfred would do that. Yeah. But it's now more what Lucius does. So
a bit of a common sense gatekeeper, isn't he? He's kind of there to go, look, mate, if you're never seen during the day and all that jazz, then like people might start to think, could you be that Batman fella? And at the same time, you need to be running this business. You need to be running it in a certain way because you need to be able to fund this lifestyle that is not cheap. And he is. I guess he fills in the gaps of us as an audience, going, "Well, this is fucking stupid, isn't it?" That age-old. Well, Superman looks the same. He's just taking his glasses off. I think with Batman, there are some bits where you go, "There's some logic leaps I have to take," and he almost helps fill in the spots in between, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's that thing just made you remember. Well, yeah, this is how he gets away with it.
Yeah.
So who is your?
He gets, as I say, he gets away with it because he's got a great supporting cast. That's the thing, isn't it? Going back to like kind of our reason for looking at this was going. Sometimes those people are between the cracks or right in the middle of it. Without them, the stories wouldn't make so much sense or would be open to more logic gaps.
Yes. So who makes your 4?
So my 4 is my first biggie, I would say, and I think this one is a biggie. And a bit like what you said about Alfred. I think sometimes, and probably why they're 4 and not higher up, is there's been so much in published history about this character that suffers from a lot more ups and downs than maybe some of my other ones that make the list. But it is J. Jonah Jameson, and do you know what?
My number 3.
Okay, so I wonder whether it gets some crossover. I just think that he's a great foil for Spider-Man, isn't it? We always talk about like Spider-Man having either the best or the second best, depending on your feeling of his Rogues Gallery against Batman's kind of Rogues Gallery out there. But J. Jonah Jameson is one of the ones I always think of. He's the person who I think of as Spider-Man's non-violent arch nemesis, and he's such a good vehicle for for probably for the first 20 years of publication, he was the major vehicle for pushing the whole storyline of is Spider-Man a menace or not. And without that, I'm not entirely sure Spider-Man resonates so much in that everyman thing, because once Peter Parker gets bitten by a spider, gets all these powers and can do all this stuff, what grounds him again? Because all of a sudden he's fantastical to us. So he needed something that was probably the same as the X-Men. The X-Men are disliked because they're mutants. So you needed something that made Spider-Man have day-to-day peril. And it is J. Jonah Jameson. And an amazing visual as well. You know, like when they were designing this character, they knocked it out of the park, didn't they? And I'm sure they based it on so many newspaper moguls, probably radio stars of the time and things like that. But yeah, just fantastic. And I know I said he's been around for so long that I think he's had probably more ups and downs than a lot of people have because of the creators. But to still be a relevant character to this day, so many years later, but without being a powered character or anything like that, an absolute testament to how brilliant he is.
Yeah, and as I said, my number 3 is Jay. It's even in things like I was reading the new She-Hulk run, and one of the cases is Spider-Man versus Jonah, and he just, even in that, he still comes as just an absolute dick.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. It's like, yeah, he is a villain, but he's a complete dick.
And with his tender moments,
you love to hate him.
But when he has over the years, he has his tender moments and things like that. I think the beautiful thing is, and it's what you were saying just there, is even his tender moments within 30 seconds is the dick he is again, because he can't help but be the dick he is.
Yeah, it's that thing of like, oh, just begrudgingly, I've been saved. I was about to. Fuck you, Spider-Man!
Yep. Oh, yeah. Despite you saving my life, I need to push my narrative. Front page of newspaper, Spider-Man dick bag, and you know, like we are. I think it's next year is the 60th anniversary of him. And you just go 60 years. That's a hell of a time. And you know, we said about Alfred in the movies. So now we've had a lot of Spider-Man lore, cartoons, and everything. And I still, when I think of J. Jonah Jameson, think of the comic book one. You know, there's never been and don't get me wrong, there's been some great visual portrayals of him, but it's comic book Jonah, that's the one I always go to.
Yeah, and though I will, whenever I read it, I always have the film/game voice as I'm reading it. That I think it was the same guy that also did like the comics or the cartoon as well. Does the voice for like pretty much everything for Joe for him, and it is that typical American sort of crazy news anchor.
Yeah.
Should be on like Fox News or something, like being right wing as fuck.
And like during this sort of Dan Slott run, which is one of my favourite Spider-Man runs, he does go on to, I think it's an internet radio station, so I think we're kind of in that world at that point. But yeah, moves away from publishing because, you know, people would want to hear him shock jock style and all this sort of stuff. And in like you put a lot of thought into him, even if he's not doing anything kind of major in the story. But there's that large part of me that goes, yeah, he'd have voted for Trump, not necessarily because he believed in
Alex Wright.
but not necessarily because he believes in Trump, but because he thinks that Spider-Man wouldn't vote for Trump. So
Yeah.
he would need to vote for Trump just to kind of force that hand a bit.
So that's my 3 and your 4. So we'll go straight to you with your 3.
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to steal one of yours here because again, I don't think you've read this run, but it's Everett Ross from Black Panther. And he does make an appearance in the Black Panther movie. He's played by Martin Freeman in the movie. So, but much like I said about Blind Out, and again, I think this was, in fact, I'm just going to look to my screen on the right because I do have the year, and I think it was 98. So I'm playing in that world. So you can see that a lot of mine are coming from probably my peak years of superheroing, or maybe where some things transitioned for superheroing. But this was Black Panther getting a solo series, and it was written by Christopher Priest, a writer I love, and my love started from this series. And I'd seen Black Panther like in Avengers, a couple of Fantastic Four stories, and he was just a dude for me, a dude who turned up kind of like it's okay, but didn't really do anything spectacular. And then a series was coming out under the Marvel Knights banner. I'd started reading Daredevil, written by Kevin Smith under that banner. I'd really like that, so I thought I'll give this a go. And the series knocked my socks off, and the series really, really knocked my socks off. It is in that top echelon of comic books runs that I've ever read, to a large part because of Everett Ross. So he is a government official, and not even kind of that higher ranking a one, that good a one, bit of a kind of lifetime jobber when it starts off, and he gets tied up with Black Panther. I think he's doing a kind of emissary job with Wakanda, or they've got emissaries coming over, and he gets embroiled in the story. And he does have lots of moments where kind of him and T'Challa work together, and like they fight Mephisto. And when I say fight, he's kind of there, but might do some smart stuff. Now, why do I love him as a supporting character? So I'll go back to what I said. I had no real interest in the Black Panther series. I had no real interest in Black Panther as a main character. Much of my interest in Black Panther as a main character come because Everett Ross was in the series. Everett Ross is me when I'm reading this comic, for good and bad. So he really anchors this series, and even Priest has said this later on when he's written about it, of saying no one was really interested in Black Panther. No one really wanted a comic book about him. So I needed to ground it in something that the audience would like. So I put in, and his words, what I think a white male comic book reader would want to see, or that would be querying during this, I made this character say out loud. And so every time he was kind of querying it, that's what was going through my head. And it always gave me the answers, and it allowed Black Panther to become this quite amazing character in it, because he was stood next to an average white guy. And it really elevated the whole story and elevated the character. So, yeah, I think he's exceptional for the craft of what a supporting character can do.
Yeah, it's one of those who have said, I've seen the films, so I know him from there. It's said with Black Panther, it's not a character that makes me want to go, ooh, I need to read all of this.
And that's pretty much what Everett Ross says from the first issue onwards, of going, I'm hanging around with this guy. He's a bit of a middling hero. Why am I hanging around with him? And I think you see the amazing feats that he can do through the eyes of yourself. But this run, if you were ever going to read a Black Panther run, I would say read this run.
Okay, so it is one of those I should give it a go. But yeah, it's just a character that I've just even the films haven't really grabbed me with it as a character.
What, you mean one of the top 5 MCU movies?
It's all right.
But yes, yeah. Oh, mileage might vary, but I think maybe the movie I enjoyed because it felt very much of this era. It felt like the people making this movie had read this run and liked this run as well. So I think that's maybe again why it resonates a bit more with me.
So
and at one point he offers Mephisto, so the devil himself, a Pez. Who doesn't want that in a supporting character?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my number 2 is Foggy from Daredevil.
The Fogster, the Ginger Love God.
Yes. One of those who've obviously go back to previous episodes where we did Daredevil and we did the Frank Miller run and stuff, and that was my first real sort of reading of it. Obviously, then watching the TV show sort of helps that, but sort of I've dropped in and out with little bits here and there. And Foggy is just, again, like a lot of these sort of characters, the voice of reason to Matt in this case, where Matt's like, oh, I'm trying to do all this hero shit and then also do all of his other stuff. And he's like, dude, you can't do everything. You're not perfect. You're not Superman. And he just gives him a grounding. And also with Foggy, he also gets himself into situations that you're like, for God's sake, what have you done, man? So he then gets the saving by Daredevil. And yeah, it is one of those, there is a lot of good that these two get up to together, especially in their day jobs when they're the lawyers. And he's like, "Oh no, you've got this. Off you go. I've got to run away and go be a hero." And yeah, I really sort of enjoy Foggy a lot, and as I said, it's perfect for the Daredevil character to have someone like Foggy.
He very much crossed my mind. You know what I said about J. Jonah Jameson? Again with Foggy. Foggy's been around for a very long time. I think where I said with J. Jonah Jameson, I felt like there's ups and downs.
Yeah.
Where Foggy lost it for me is in the hands of a good writer, he's brilliant. In the hands of a bad writer, he's awful. And I feel like rather than what I'm saying with JJ, we get some ups and downs, I feel like it is peaks and troughs with Foggy.
Yeah.
And I think there's, and maybe I'm just unlucky. There's too many runs that I've read where he's just an idiot with a bow tie that just annoys the shit out of me. And I think because the highs are so great, as you say, he can be the moral compass. He can be outside of the moral compass. He can be that grounding. He can be that person that says you're not Superman. Although obviously he wouldn't say that because of being in the company. But and also things like the law firm. Like the kind of keeping a day-to-day business running, like we said about Lucius Fox. I think when used well, he is fantastic. When used badly, it pains me. And I think that's why, for me, he wasn't considered just because of bad writers have treated him badly in their time.
So it's one of those I've lucked out to not read where he's been awful then.
Yeah. I and again, I think that's you've probably done quite well because you've probably had most of the good Daredevil stuff that you've gone to, and whenever we talk Daredevil, or if you say to me, I want to read some Daredevil, I will definitely give you some stuff to shy away from and say, don't read that, because that's where it gets really bad for me. But I think of him as I say, it's such a swing. It's how great he has been, and there's that twat in a spotty bow tie, and that's too much for me for him to make my top 5.
That's fair enough. But who does make number 2?
Well, someone that I'm surprised you haven't said. So I'm a little bit worried that I might be stealing your number 1. But I'm going to go for it. And if it is your number 1, let me know and we'll just talk about it. Jim Gordon. I thought it might be. I will do a brief bit on him because he's your number 1. I'll let you go longer. Again, we talk about in the history of comic books and how many years. I've always liked him. He is. I mean, I think grounding him with his family, making him work with Batman. He is the policeman, and there have been times, I guess, where writers have tinkered into this, but he's the policeman that I would want to be if I was a policeman. He's the family man I would generally want to be, although, I say generally want to be, like I probably would be, because I'd probably let work take over and not always be there for my family. But he's a kind of human being generally that I would want to be. And I'm not sure whether I am brave, bold enough, or have the moral compass to be Jim Gordon. And I think we talk about grounding again. I think he has generally been shown as someone who wants to work with Batman, sees the good in Batman, sees the need in Batman, but also isn't afraid to challenge Batman. And I think that has to exist in that Batman universe.
Yeah, with Gordon, again, with a lot of the people in this, he really can be the moral compass in the story. Key point. Well, it's been at least 10 minutes since it's been mentioned. It's actually not even been mentioned this issue yet. Killing Joke.
Yep.
Is his moral story. He doesn't want. He has the worst day ever taken to him. His daughter gets fucking shot and probably raped, but we don't know it's definite. Yet he still wants to do it by the book.
Yep, turns the other cheek, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He lives life that way that I guess we aspire to, but probably know that we're not strong enough to.
And the thing is, there are many different versions of Gordon throughout the years. Recently been reading some of the new Harley Quinn stuff that's linked to the TV animated show.
Yeah.
And in that, he is an angry, vengeful Gordon that really just wants to get Harley. He's like, fuck everything. I need to get Harley. He's like driven to obsession.
They give him an angrier moustache to reflect his angrier ways.
Yes. But yeah, he's still Gordon. Still, I have to be the police. But it's that point where he has an obsession to get something done. Whether it be him just being the one to set the light up and have that conversation with Batman, to whether he is the peril, which he has been multiple times, or his family's the peril, or even he has to talk Batman out of going too far. He is always there and always been consistently well written. And there are points to going back through some of the Golden Age stuff where the characteristics have changed because of what a cop was back then.
Yep.
So he would have a coffee and a donut and was smoking, and the terms that he would use were appropriate at the time for what was correct at the time. I remember there being one of the ones around the 60-ish sort of time where he calls out hippies for having long hair, sort of thing. And it's just like it's of the time.
Yeah.
But he's still got the core of what makes him Gordon even then. But it's just to me, he is the perfect non-hero side character, because if you didn't have him, Batman truly is a vigilante that has no links to
no controls, no sort of countermeasures or anything like that, and no one's saying
accountability.
We'll back you, but you can't step over this line and to pull you back. And I know I said that earlier, that the thing that makes him shine for me is that is the family. And when I say the family, his connections, he has a life outside of this. Quite often you'll see with some of these side characters or supporting characters that you don't get to know the best about them. It's just about their interaction with the hero. And again, in here, he's got a profession that can very much take over your life, and to large degrees it does, because he really believes in law and order, justice, etc., etc., etc. And you see those impacts on it, but you still know at his core he is a family man, and he would love to be at home all the time. But for him, the sacrifice is that I want you to be safe, and that safety of my family sometimes trumps my experience with the family. like we said with some of the others, because he's got such a long history, there will be some runs out there that aren't so great. But in general, I think he's always been treated well. I think people who come onto there get him and realise that he's such a good character to use.
Yes. So your number one, I think I know what it is.
Do you want to have a guess?
Aunt May.
Well, you're wrong.
Oh.
Oh, sorry, but before we do Aunt May, the only reason why I said so, I remember I said it on Blind Al and the Aunt May connection. At some point, Deadpool goes on a bit of a time traveling caper, and he gets Blind Al to pretend to be Aunt May. So the resemblance, the physical resemblance, is good. No, there's only one thing that could be number one for me, and I talk about Jim Gordon as being a perfect example of sort of portraying a character in a role. In this case, like a policeman. So, how could I pick as my number one anything other than the greatest butler that there is in comic book history? And that's Jarvis from the Avengers. You can stick your Alfred up your bum. No, I'm joking. Where I said like where someone kind of didn't make the list. Like for me, Jarvis is my butler, and I don't have a butler. I don't mean it like, yeah, he's just like the butler who brings me my drinks during the podcast.
Jeeves.
I started reading Avengers was one of the first comics that I got into, and I loved it. And through the large part of my Avengers reading, certainly the early to kind of mid parts of it, Jarvis wasn't ever present. And don't get me wrong, I didn't grow up in a world with a butler. It seemed weird. It was out of place. But Jarvis was the grounding for these supremely powerful, often characters. So you would see them go off and they would be fighting in another galaxy. They would save the universe and they'd come back and Jarvis would be there in a traditional English butler from a TV show, or to go back to Alfred, what we'd seen for Alfred in the Batman show. But I think it was always that thing of going, ultimately, he's the heart and soul of this team. Like no matter who's in, no matter what characters rotate out, they'll always come back to the mansion and Jarvis will make him a sandwich, do all those things. And he wasn't a bumbling, but there would be moments where he'd be bumbling, but he wasn't he never took off his top and you found out underneath he was rippling with muscles and all these sort of things. He was just a normal human being and he wanted to help. I mean, he was employed, but he wanted to help all these people who were saving the world, saving the universe. And what come across on the page, and was the pride of that, was the love of it. You know, this was his family. And you know, the kids that lived in the house, like with the heroes, they would interchange, but he was kind of always there for them. And I said it on my top 5 moments, and very early doors in my reading, but to see him take an absolute kicking from Mr. Hyde in front of Captain America, because Zemo twigged that would hurt Cap more than most things would. Now, I mean, in the movies, there's a Jarvis. It's an AI Jarvis, which ultimately becomes Vision. But this is a straight up English gent doing his thing, and I love him. Now, if I started reading comics today, would I still have that love? I don't know, but nothing can tear away my love for this character that meant so much to me early doors. I think it was my little eye in, and I don't want to be a butler, by the way. I'm not advertising that, but it was my little eye to normal people in this fantastic world, and absolutely loved him.
Yes, obviously the film's doing weird, but even up to the modern stuff, as I said, going back to what I was mentioning earlier with the She-Hulk run, him cleaning up after her while she's bringing back random dudes. And it's like they need to go. And just sort of being that. It's like a nanny or like a fucking matron of a school block. So they're all kids and they're all pains in the ass, but you need someone there to remind them that, they need to eat their dinner and do their teeth and
I mean, I would say a parent, but I think like a carer for children is probably a better description, isn't it? Of kind of going, yeah, some of my kids, Cap can take care of himself, but he might need my shoulder to cry on every now and again, or to talk about things. Whereas Iron Man, like Tony starts to come back pissed, so I might need to kind of get him into his bed. Yeah, I might need to get rid of the random one night stands that She-Hulk or Star Fox, when he was in it, would bring back. And the glue that kind of bound certainly the years when they were in the. And I know that the character hasn't gone, but it resonates more to me of the years when they lived in the mansion together. And Avengers comics have moved on and things have changed. But a great character from a great time for me.
Yes. So, your top fives? Tell me.
Yeah.
Fill them in.
And before we move on, I noticed you said Aunt May. Do you want to touch on Aunt May and why she didn't make either of our top fives? Because she's a big character, and I think a lot of people would think of her as a top five supporting character. And I also wanted to quickly touch on Lois Lane as well while we're doing kind of the end point. And for me, Aunt May is there, and I know she's there for Peter, but she just never really interested me, if I'm honest.
Yeah, the thing about May is she may be the original, but they've done that character better many times more. She is the first one to be the caring old dear that sees through everything and finds out that, oh, I know you're a superhero, but you still come home, you still have your dinner. Yeah, it's been done better since her.
I think the movie versions, and I know we shouldn't, but I think the movie versions were nowhere near as good as the comic versions for her as well. And I find the movie versions lessen her as a character for me.
Except in No Way Home, the at least who is being Aunt May, because that version of Aunt May.
But isn't that
the much younger Aunt May?
No, that's the worst one for me.
MILF May.
Fantastic actress, but my God, I hated that part of it. Aunt May's an old lady. Should be an old lady. Will always be an old lady. She's not someone for dirty, filthy MCU Robert Downey Jr. to mack on. No way, Jose. Or if he is, it should be old school Aunt May. And we just find out that Robert Downey Jr. has a thing for like grandma level or grandma age people.
Yes.
And Lois Lane for me, I don't read enough Superman. I don't like Superman enough to feel anything for Lois Lane, other than, and this is the opposite of Aunt May, from stuff from TV shows and movies. That's my major experience of Lois Lane rather than the comic book Lois Lane.
Yeah, it's just my not really doing much Superman-y.
I am planning, by the way, I'm saying this live because then I can be held to it. I am planning on, in the not too distant future, going on a bit of a Superman binge. I want to pick out some runs and really, really try with some of what's considered the greatest Superman stuff, because he is such an iconic give us some suggestions down there. He is such an iconic character, and I've just never got it. But I do wonder whether most of the stuff I've read was stuff I rando picked up off of comic book shelves rather than procured it and went, this is the one to read. So I am going to give Superman a bit of a chunky go.
Yeah, there's something for later in the year or next year at least, probably because of where we are in the year. But we'll definitely hit some Superman because, as I said, neither of us have much exposure to it.
No.
Or the exposure that we have had has left us a bit cold.
Yeah.
So, as we mentioned earlier, next one's a biggie. Next show, Sandman.
We got our Sandman
on it.
Yeah.
But until then,
if you haven't read it yet, we're doing Preludes and Nocturnes, the first trade. So if you haven't read it and you want to join along with us as we talk about it, get yourself a copy. Also available on DC Universe Infinite. Sponsor us, DC Universe Infinite. So get your Sandman on and join us in a week's time.
Yes. But until then, like, subscribe, ring bells, do all the YouTubey stuff. Comments down there. And whilst you wait for another stash to come, watch some music videos or us reacting to stuff, especially if you're a fan of Rammstein. Lots of Rammstein.
If you're a fan of German music in general, let's be honest, we've gone on a mass German binge recently. So
Yes. So until next time, goodbye.